The United Nations main hall was buzzing with flashes of cameras, whispers in translation headsets, and shiny shoes clicking across the marble floor. Every major world leader was present. Trump, 47th President of the United States of America. The host raised his voice. Next, we hear from Burkina Faso's young revolutionary leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. There was a pause. Then, a tall figure in full military uniform stood up slowly, calm, steady, commanding. He took no notes. He didn't smile. His voice cut through the room like lightning. Donald Trump, stop meddling in Africa, or face the consequences. Gasps. Cameras zoomed in. Some laughed nervously, others whispered. A few UN guards reached for their earpieces. Trump blinked, leaned forward on the screen and muttered, "Is that a threat?" But Ibrahim didn't flinch. He stared directly into the camera, not just at Trump, but at every African child watching. Something shifted in that room. Not a sound. Not even the translators moved. This wasn't just politics. It was a reckoning. Earlier that week, media outlets mocked Ibrahim for even being invited to the UN summit. One American anchor called him a military amateur pretending to lead a country. A European columnist said Traoré was too young to be taken seriously. But Ibrahim didn't come to New York for praise. He came with evidence. He came with pain, with truth, and the weight of generations behind him. That night in his hotel room, before the summit, he opened his old leather bag. Inside were photos. A boy killed by a drone strike. Villages flattened. Letters from mothers begging for clean water. American weapons used in African coups. He thought of his father, once a farmer, then a corpse in a forgotten war. He whispered to himself, "Tomorrow I speak for all of them." Now, standing in the UN, eyes locked on Trump's face across the screen, Ibrahim's heart raced, but his voice remained calm. "Your hands are not clean, not just yours, but all of those who have drained Africa's hope." The entire summit hall was silent, but the world watching from their homes had just started crying. From his seat, Ibrahim reached into his jacket pocket, a small black folder. Everyone's eyes followed his hand. Some security agents stood up. One diplomat from France looked pale. Ibrahim held the file high. "This is proof. Contracts, emails, intelligence reports. From Libya to Niger, from Mali to Sudan, decades of interference. Puppet leaders installed, rebel groups funded, coups arranged, elections manipulated." He dropped it on the podium with a thud that echoed through the marble chamber. The moderator tried to interrupt, but the room refused to move. Then Ibrahim pointed again. "You sat back and watched our children die. For what? Gold, uranium, rare earth minerals." He turned toward the delegates from Europe and America. "Every resource taken, every leader we tried to choose, removed. Every future we tried to dream on, stolen." Trump on the screen shifted uncomfortably. He leaned toward his mic. "That's not true. That's not fair." But Ibrahim didn't look at him. He looked at the camera again. "Let the world decide. I've uploaded everything." And just like that, millions of people received a link on their phones. The documents were real, and the tears, they had only just begun. As Ibrahim's words echoed in the massive hall, the cameras captured the stunned faces of diplomats from every corner of the world. Not a single whisper passed between them. Some clutched their phones tightly. Others swallowed hard. The gravity of what had been said was sinking in. Behind the scenes, aides scrambled. Phones buzzed non-stop. An American delegate wiped sweat from his brow. The French ambassador leaned over to whisper urgently to a colleague, eyes wide with shock. The world was watching, live. But it wasn't just the leaders who felt the weight of Ibrahim's message. Outside the UN building, thousands gathered near giant screens, eyes glued to the broadcast. Mothers held their children close, tears silently tracing down their faces. Young students, tired of being ignored, clenched their fists in hope. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, miles away, watched from his estate. His expression darkened. He muttered, "Is that a threat?" To no one in particular. In that moment, the room froze, but the world began to tremble. Back in his hotel room that morning, long before the summit began, Ibrahim had quietly prepared. He pulled out a battered leather folder filled with pages that many powerful people wished never saw the light of day. Inside were secrets, documents proving decades of interference, of puppet governments installed, of resources stolen under foreign commands. His hands trembled, but his resolve did not. He thought about the children of Burkina Faso, the ones who should be playing in fields, but were instead playing hide-and-seek with war. He thought about the mothers who waited years for justice. As he placed the folder on the podium earlier, a hush had fallen over the hall. Tonight those files would reach millions, and the truth, long buried, was finally rising like a storm. The moment Ibrahim dropped the folder on the podium, social media exploded. Within seconds, millions of phones lit up with messages and videos exposing the dark history of foreign meddling. Journalists scrambled to verify the leaks. Some world leaders issued cautious statements. But in Africa, the reaction was different. A roar of relief, pride, and pain all at once. For the first time in decades, someone powerful was speaking their truth on the biggest stage. Old wounds reopened, but hope grew stronger. Back at the UN, Trump's face tightened as his advisors urged calm. But the tide had turned. The world was no longer willing to look away. Just as the murmurs began to rise in the UN hall, a surprising voice cut through the tension. A respected ambassador from South Africa, known for her calm and reasoned approach, stood up. She looked directly at Ibrahim, then at the entire assembly. "Captain Traoré speaks the truth many have feared to say aloud. Africa has suffered under the weight of interference for too long. We stand with you." Whispers turned into nods of agreement. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably, but the room's atmosphere had changed. The cameras captured the solidarity. People watching at home noticed. This was more than politics. It was a movement. Ibrahim's eyes softened just for a moment. A silent thank you to the ally who dared to break the silence. Outside, the African diaspora erupted in cheers. Families gathered, tears running freely. The pain of history mixed with the hope of a new day. But somewhere deep inside, Ibrahim knew the battle was far from over. Minutes after the speech, Ibrahim's team discreetly sent the leaked documents to major international news agencies and activists. The evidence was undeniable. Contracts, emails, footage exposing decades of covert operations. Messages flooded social media. Finally, the truth. Ibrahim is our voice. But not everyone welcomed this light. Backstage, Ibrahim's security team warned of threats and possible sabotage. Still, he remained calm. His resolve came from memories of his childhood village, the dusty roads, the faces of neighbors lost to violence and poverty. He whispered quietly to himself, "This is bigger than me. This is for them." And with that, the world held its breath, waiting to see what would come next. Hours passed. The global news cycle exploded. Headlines ran wild. Some nations condemned the leaks. Others demanded investigations. In Washington, Trump's advisors scrambled to contain the fallout. Trump himself appeared on a live broadcast, his face hard. "This is fake news, a political attack. We stand for democracy and freedom." But back in the UN, the tension grew thicker. Ibrahim was invited for a private meeting with the UN Secretary General. The room was quiet but heavy. "Captain," the Secretary General said, "your courage is undeniable. But the world is fragile now. What do you want from us?" Ibrahim's answer was simple yet powerful. "Justice, respect, an end to the games played with African lives. The world was watching, and the future was being rewritten. As the summit unfolded, Ibrahim's thoughts drifted to his mother, Fatoumata. She was a simple woman from a small village who had lived through war, hunger, and the loss of 3 of her children. Fatoumata never understood politics, but she knew pain. She cried the night Ibrahim left for the UN, worried if her son would return safely. Now, watching the broadcast on a cracked phone under a dim light, her tears fell freely. She whispered a prayer for her son's safety and strength. Thousands of miles away, millions of mothers like Fatoumata watched too. Each tear was a silent vow. Their pain was being heard. Ibrahim carried their hope and sorrow on his shoulders. His fight was not just for today, but for generations to come. And somewhere inside the marble walls of the UN, that truth echoed louder than words. Late into the night, Ibrahim sat alone in his hotel room. The documents had unleashed a storm. Phone calls from unknown numbers, veiled threats, and warnings came fast. But Ibrahim stayed steady. He remembered the faces of the children he had met during his visits to rural Burkina Faso, eyes wide with trust, unaware of the dangers around them. He wrote a simple message on his phone and sent it to his closest allies. "We must stand firm. This is for our people." Outside, the city lights of New York twinkled, indifferent to the battles fought in hotel rooms. But inside Ibrahim's heart burned a quiet fire. He was not just fighting words or documents. He was fighting for dignity. And he would never back down. The leaked documents spread like wildfire. Global news outlets could no longer ignore the story. For the first time, millions saw the hidden costs of decades-long foreign interference. Town halls in Europe and America filled with heated debates. Students in Africa organized peaceful protests calling for justice. Even some politicians reluctantly admitted changes were overdue. At the UN, delegates whispered behind closed doors. A new respect grew for Ibrahim Traoré, the young captain who dared to expose uncomfortable truths. In homes from Ouagadougou to Johannesburg, a collective sigh was heard. Hope was fragile, but real. The world was watching, and the future of Africa was beginning to rewrite itself, one brave voice at a time. As dawn broke over New York, Ibrahim sat quietly in a small conference room. His thoughts wandered back to history, the scars left on Africa by centuries of exploitation and broken promises. He remembered the stories his grandfather told, of colonizers who took lands, enslaved people, and left behind chaos, of leaders bought and sold like merchandise, of communities destroyed for gold, diamonds, and oil. Those old wounds were still bleeding. But today, Ibrahim was not just a man speaking at the UN. He was the voice of generations who had suffered in silence. The burden was heavy, but so was his hope. He knew this moment could change everything or break him. Yet he felt a quiet power rising inside. A power born from truth, courage, and love for his people. This was more than a speech. It was a reckoning. News of Ibrahim's bold speech and leaked files sent shockwaves worldwide. Some countries rallied behind him, demanding accountability and respect for African sovereignty. Others doubled down, calling him reckless and dangerous. Social media was flooded with debates, tears, and prayers. Families in Africa prayed for peace, while activists lit candles for justice. In Washington, Trump's circle grew defensive, preparing countermoves. But Ibrahim stood firm. He was no longer just a soldier or politician. He was a symbol of hope, strength, and unyielding resilience. Millions watched, hearts pounding, waiting for the next chapter in this unfolding drama. The world was divided. But one thing was certain. The silence was broken. Amid the chaos, Few noticed the quiet moments that shaped Ibrahim's journey. In a small village far from the spotlight, children played near a dusty river. Their laughter was pure, untouched by politics. Ibrahim's voice echoed in their dreams, promising a future where they could grow without fear. He was fighting for them, for every child who deserved to live in peace, for every mother who cried for her lost son, for every community waiting for a brighter tomorrow. And as the UN debated, as the world watched, Ibrahim's heart stayed with those simple faces. The true cost of power, he knew, was responsibility, and he carried it humbly. The UN chamber was electric with tension. Ibrahim Traoré's words hung heavy in the air. He looked once again directly into the camera, his voice steady but fierce. Donald Trump, you have ignored our calls. You have watched as our people suffered while your interests grew richer. This is your final warning. Stop meddling in Africa, or face the consequences. The room fell silent, the kind of silence that felt like a storm gathering. Trump's face on the screen tightened. He muttered, almost under his breath, "Is that a threat?" Ibrahim's eyes burned brighter. "It is a promise. The consequences will be borne not by us, but by those who cling to old powers and fear justice." Diplomats gasped. Cameras flashed. Millions across the world held their breath. This moment wasn't just history, it was destiny. Within hours, Ibrahim's warning became a global headline. People wept for Africa, for justice long delayed. Children who had never dreamed of change whispered hope. Families across the continent embraced one another, tears of pride and relief mixing. Meanwhile, in political halls worldwide, leaders reconsidered alliances, policies, and power. Some reached out quietly to Ibrahim, recognizing his strength and vision. The United Nations itself called for an urgent summit focused on African sovereignty and respect. And Ibrahim? He returned home a hero, not just for his bravery, but for carrying the dreams of millions. He stood with humility, knowing this was only the beginning. Months later, in a sunlit village, Ibrahim visited a school built with funds raised after his speech. Children laughed freely, playing under the wide sky. He knelt and spoke softly to a young girl, her eyes shining bright. "This is what we fight for. A future where every child can grow safe, strong, and free." His heart swelled with hope and sadness. The battles ahead were many, but so was his faith. Back on screens worldwide, people watched and cried, not from sorrow but from the power of truth and courage. And now, dear viewer, if Ibrahim's story moved you, if his courage sparked something deep inside, join us. Like, subscribe, and comment below your thoughts and hopes. Your voice matters. Together we can carry this message farther than any summit ever could. Because the fight for justice, for love, for Africa's future, it belongs to all of us.